You see, in an unwanted powerful morning. Good morning, good morning. So Ukraine continues to threaten Belarus for some reason. It's not clear why. A little digression. They say that Belarus may become part of a new front against Ukraine. That is, a new offensive is planned from the north. And so what do we have? That's why that very Magyar Brody, who was supposedly killed by those very Oreshnik missiles, announced today that 500 targets have been identified on the territory of Belarus if Lukashenko decides to fully participate in the war against Ukraine on the side of Russia. This was stated by that very Brody. In particular, he said the following, but then it got rude, so I won't read that part. And the only thing he said was that this is planned only in the event that Belarus attacks. But again, all sorts of things are possible here. For example, right now, escalation is beneficial for Kyiv, because there is money and resources to fight. They can keep building all this, keep building those villas, corporations, dynasties, or whatever they're called, without any problems or worries. Everything is going just fine for the leadership of Ukraine right now. They get money and there's still trust. Well, I don't know. Whether it's just for show or not, nevertheless, in Europe they practically idolize this whole gang and keep inviting them over, as well as visiting Ukraine themselves. By the way, there's an interesting thing about the trip to Ukraine. And here is a fragment of Zelensky's meeting with Tikhanovskaya. Tikhanovskaya, if you don't remember, is the wife of the Belarusian opposition figure Tikhanovsky, who was imprisoned. His wife suddenly became a leader, even though she didn't want to go into politics. And now she is considered by Europeans and the US to be some sort of alternative leader of Belarus, or maybe even the president. Well, something like that. Naturally, she has no real power. She doesn't make any decisions, but look at how the conference is going.
We are meeting with the minister. If this issue were resolved, many more Belarusians would be able to.
And as I understand it, she's communicating. I wasn't listening very closely, but it's either in Belarusian or Ukrainian. It would be interesting if Zelensky spoke Ukrainian and she spoke Belarusian using a translator. I have no doubt that's what happened. But maybe Tikhanovskaya, for the sake of meeting such a great person, learned Ukrainian or at least memorized her questions in Ukrainian. I don't know about that. I have no idea. Well, what's the point of all this? I mean, just imagine how much money is wasted on all these flights. Flights, food, restaurant visits, organizational expenses, salaries for the organizers, salaries for these very leaders. I think you could have built a school instead. Just skip meetings somewhere in southern Cape Town or somewhere else for a month and build a proper school for normal kids. But no. Then this Magyara Sibiga joined in with the threats. Sibiga is our greatest diplomat of all time, Sparta. An active bulletproof vest just for the head instead of the torso, because not every vest can protect the torso there. And here's what he says. The very fact of publicly voicing such threats, he's talking about Lavrov. What's interesting here is that Ukraine, represented by that very Brody, seems to be threatening Belarus, although he says if you attack, we will respond. But at least there are 500 targets. And here he's speaking after the Russian Federation announced its intention to bomb Kyiv or something like that, or carry out some other threats. He stated that the very fact of publicly voicing such threats indicates a disregard for international conditions for ending the war. In my opinion, both sides have long since disregarded these international conditions, and it's beneficial for everyone. Everything is just fine. And then he stated that he considers this a bold provocation. This is a public confirmation, yet another confirmation. A confirmation of Russia's interest in continuing the war? This is Lavrov allowing himself to publicly reveal the course of the conversation, where he confirms that he is threatening attacks near Kyiv. For me, it's very hard to comprehend how something like this can even be allowed. But on the one hand, it's a threat. But on the other hand, it seems to be known how and where they will strike, because ordinary citizens might be able to escape if something happens. And that's actually a good thing. Again, I've already shown this, but here a list appeared online in the public domain. First, what will be used to bomb, and second, where the bombing will happen. Unfortunately, we don't know how much, but we do know the list of all this weaponry. Look, there's a huge amount here. There are strategic bombers, regular ones, ballistic missiles, and attack drones. In fact, almost 1,000 of them. And cruise missiles, and even 3 Zircon missiles. In short, there's a lot here, and all of this is promised to be launched at Kiev. In Kiev, yes, on different streets and in several other cities as well. I've already shown this. Check out the previous video, it's more detailed there. I don't want to repeat myself now. Honestly, if I were in Siberia's place, I wouldn't make a big fuss about all this, because the US still wants to cut NATO expenses. And now they're saying that they want to cut, once again, previous commitments. What does that mean? It means less money. And what does less money mean? It means less capability. And it seems the Ukrainians are involved. And less capability means, well, maybe they won't be able to build villas somewhere else. I never get tired of showing them. By the way, let's measure Siberia's capability, because I haven't done any tests in a long time. Well, capability. Siberia is strong as always. He's doing great. Keep it up. All right, let's not. So, what else is being said? Washington is cutting back. Then again, there are plans to cut back. They're already demanding reports about the reductions. But the most interesting thing is this. The Europeans will have to quickly and independently fill the gaps that have formed. First of all, the Europeans are now buying weapons for Ukraine. That's a huge amount of money. Secondly, the Europeans are allocating, how much is it, 90 billion or something like that? The Europeans are giving even more money to Ukraine. On top of that, the Europeans suddenly allocated 11.5 billion to the Baltic states. For what? To fight against drones. Well, who is launching drones at the Baltic states right now? They don't explode. Just the day before yesterday, a drone fell into a lake and sank. Ukraine is finding these drones because there are just so many of them flying everywhere right now. And since Ukrainian drones, according to various unconfirmed sources, are apparently being allowed through the airspace of the Baltic states, sometimes the drones go off course and maybe crash, maybe keep flying. The Baltic states themselves really don't like this at all. And apparently, so that they keep really disliking this along with the fight against drones, they are being allocated 11.5 billion euros. That's the kind of money that no one has ever seen, except for people like Bezos, Elon Musk, and others like them. It's unlikely that even with a company's value, that much money could be in any account all at once. Usually you can't just come up with that kind of money on demand, but here it happened instantly. They transferred it. What else do we have about the US? By the way, the US is currently in a difficult situation with Iran. There's no end in sight to this war. Sometimes it seems like they're agreeing to a ceasefire, sometimes not. But oil prices keep going up and down. And as a result, some people are making great money off of this. And then what? Then the US also wants to cut not only the amount of funds, the money they're investing, but also to provide NATO with significantly fewer strategic bombers. When it comes to fighter jets, they're also talking about reducing the American contribution by 30%. It seems like if something happens, the same Baltic states or someone else will have to take part in all this on their own. And Europe doesn't have that much money. I've said this more than once. First, there's what they're sending over. That's one thing. Second, factories are shutting down. Industrial enterprises, car manufacturers. Some are being bought out by arms companies. But the weapons produced by these arms companies, for the most part, especially those used in war, that's just money spent. They just go down the drain. It's expensive. Jobs are created. Workers get paid. But where does the money come from? From the budget. It's spent on things that don't bring any benefit to the economy. So they built a tank. It either sits in a hangar or somewhere else. Those tanks just sit there. Or it drives around a testing ground. Or it takes part in a war. The tank gets destroyed and they build a new one. Basically, it's almost like burning money. Yes, part of it ends up in the workers' pockets. In a good way, I mean. Not like with powerful leaders after those billion-dollar transfers and transactions, but still it's a waste of money. And a state that's waging some kind of major war, even together with someone else. It gradually goes bankrupt. It goes bankrupt, it goes bankrupt. What else do we have? There's some chance of a truce, but it's so tiny. Honestly, I wasn't going to bring this up today, but I ended up mentioning it anyway. Again, Sibi has said that a truce is possible. But he immediately set some conditions. An airport truce, an energy truce, and a port truce. Different types of truces. He wants to discuss them with European partners. Moreover, why with the Europeans and not with Russia? Honestly, I don't get it, because that's one thing. Well, okay, maybe if you were discussing it with the US at least. The US has points of contact with the Russian Federation, But Europe doesn't have contact with Putin. Europe doesn't have contact with Lavrov. Right now, they hardly have contact with anyone, except for buying and selling gas. Yeah, that's just great. Russia sells gas to its so-called enemies. The so-called enemies use this gas. And everyone acts like aircraft carriers, shaking their fists at each other. Obviously, this is a multi-step game, of course. And here, apparently, another one is being prepared, with these ceasefires. Again, being discussed with the Europeans. And again, Sibiha stated that this also needs to be discussed with the Russian side. It could be an airport ceasefire. It could be an energy infrastructure ceasefire. And it could be a port ceasefire. Who will negotiate? Will it be Ursula von der Leyen, who doesn't communicate with Leyen? Or maybe Kaja Kallas? Or someone else? It's absolutely impossible to understand. Honestly, I have little idea what this will be and who will be negotiating all this, but apparently since Sibiha says so, then someone will be negotiating after all, but there is no third option. Along with Sibiha, Zelensky also stood out, a friend, comrade and brother, so to speak, because he held a bilateral meeting with Poroshenko. But you remember this Poroshenko who in 2019 competed with Zelensky for the president's seat. It's all the same. Look up what Escobar's axiom is. One or the other, it doesn't matter. But in the end, we have what we have. And what we have, not everyone likes it, far from it. Poroshenko once shouted that he was an opponent. Although he was the one who first introduced this concept of army faith language into the constitution, army faith language. He also introduced Ukraine's aspiration to join NATO into the constitution and the necessity to get there. Well, and Zelensky is basically Poroshenko on steroids, or maybe Poroshenko or a stripped-down Poroshenko-Zelensky, it's hard to say. But at least they have already met, apparently, to create some kind of united front. And Poroshenko, quite satisfied, wrote that for the first time in many years, our meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky took place. In a situation where Ukraine is fighting for survival, dialogue with the parliament and restoring its agency is important. There are too many challenges that can only be overcome together. Well, and I think that's wonderful. Here we see firsthand the confirmation of that ancient legend, according to which the gods once divided the super-powerful inhabitants of the earth. The first people, so to speak, were split into two parts, a male half and a female half. And since then, these two halves have been searching for each other. If one half ever manages to find the other, then the most powerful being will reappear, and things won't go very well for those gods. Here we see two men, of course, but you could also say that all the power was divided. Somehow one got more, the other less, but now, as they somehow come together, the country will probably immediately flourish. Right away we'll have 4 Switzerlands, maybe even 5, or the equivalent of 2 United States where Ukraine is now. Economic growth, prosperity, people will be happily happy. Warm rain will fall, mushrooms will grow, wheat will ripen 4 times a year, and all of this, of course, will have the most beneficial effect on GDP. Not on Putin, I mean, but on the gross domestic product and overall on the economy of Ukraine. What do you think? Is this realistic? Write in the comments. Then, Zelensky, together with Poroshenko now, apparently will be working on bringing the youth back to their homeland. It's the youth that really bothers Zelensky. I need to calm down. It bothers him. Yes, because they left without asking for permission. They didn't ask Sanich for permission, like, can we leave on his behalf? He would have said no, but suddenly they started making a fuss and now want to bring everyone back. Zelensky thanked Ukrainians who are returning from abroad. Please tell me, who are you, the people who are coming back? Write in the comments. I'm really interested to know. I'm sure there are, of course, those who are coming back. I'm not being sarcastic here, but if you did come back, what was the reason and which country were you in? It's really interesting. Or write in the Telegram channel as well. I have a general chat there. Or you can email me. It's listed in the contact information on YouTube. Write about why you returned to Ukraine, whether you want to live there or if it's temporary or maybe it just didn't work out abroad. Anything can happen, of course. I'm not being sarcastic here. It would be interesting to know. So Zelensky wants even more people to come back, so to speak, and says the following: your homeland needs you. Why you? I don't know. Maybe I'd use the formal you, but you is okay. This isn't empty rhetoric, it's a fact. We're not being dramatic, of course. Today we're talking about how to bring Ukrainians back. Of course, we're an open country and happy to welcome anyone from any state here. He's probably hinting at the Pakistanis who are now being hired instead of Ukrainians. We're still focused on bringing millions of Ukrainians, our people, back home. He goes on to say a lot of other things as well. And now, by the way, there's this program being pushed by those thousands of talking heads that Yulia Mendel, Zelensky's press secretary or former press secretary, mentioned. And she said that Zelensky usually doesn't do what he says, but he assigns others to talk about what he promised, something good for the people. He gives this to all sorts of bloggers, not to me. Yeah, to intent makers, other journalists, politicians, and many, many others. And as a result, in his opinion, if some information is repeated 1,000 times, it will become reality. That is, for example, like when he promised apartments to refugees from Donbass, those who either came voluntarily or were brought to Ukraine, they were promised apartments or houses. And they did absolutely nothing, but they talked a lot. And when someone from Zelensky's circle tried to bring up this topic, he said something along the lines of, I don't remember exactly. We won't do it, but the main thing is to announce it, and then it will be true. So if you repeat it 1,000 times, it becomes real. Well, apparently it's the same thing now. What else? The issue of people returning is interesting too. Again, Ukrainians are coming back. If someone returns, they might have business here. Maybe someone has an expensive house or an apartment. But they're inviting Ukrainians to return, including from Germany. And the person who is offering this, it's not Zelensky anymore, doesn't know how much they pay in Germany. But this young man, information,
What he has...
He has some information,
I talked to the general staff and have insiders. Hundreds of thousands are sitting at home.
He's talking about draft dodgers, as I understand it, who are afraid to go outside. I'm just using the term draft dodger here, so everyone understands who we're talking about.
And these aren't academics, they're not academics. He's switching from the Ukrainian word for professors to the Russian one.
By the way, that was Vosko Boynik who was speaking, or maybe Vosko Boynikov, something like that. Anyway, that's the name. Before him, there was a guy in glasses.
My information...
Are you collecting it? We've already missed him. He claimed that every woman in Ukraine, in order to restore the population and ensure population growth, a demographic explosion, so to speak, should give birth to 78 children. And if that doesn't happen, then it's quite natural, quite normal to invite migrants, the same Pakistanis, Indians, so they will be the ones. He also stated, I made an entire video about this, that in 5 or 10 years there would be mixed race people in Ukraine. Well, that is, the population is gradually mixing. It all makes sense. And he said something else there, something completely outrageous. He was just standing there smiling. I don't know what kind of person he is.
Plyo, sir, is a former plumber, a former construction worker. Now he's sitting at home because he's afraid of illegal actions by the Territorial Center of Corruption.
Well, it's true, there really are a lot of people staying home. Even in the Telegram chat, again, there are a lot of people who don't go to work or take back routes because the TCC guys are really being vicious. It's just crazy what's going on. And I wouldn't recommend making fun of this, by the way, because something like this could happen to almost anyone, whether in Ukraine or in any other country where... mobilization could be announced, and I'm not just talking about Russia, but other countries too. So you never know when this could happen to you, let's put it that way. But let's listen further. If you want, we will go out,
I can't call him anything else. I have a proposal. Right now, the Verkhovna Rada will be voting on the relevant changes.
He says he has a plan to get people out of those apartments.
A contract to truly meet the social condition there.
Better pay, some kind of combat bonus again.
I suggest that those currently abroad and lacking even 20 kilograms, if they say...
Why did they show him? It's impossible to understand.
They left for various reasons. Those who are still there. Offer them now the same state, but an economic contract, which will involve the state, will provide for it. The state publishes a specific list of professions. We don't have these. None of these. 25,000 hryvnias.
Well, you'll need strong glasses for this, because now there's going to be an offer you simply can't refuse. And so as not to cause any harm to the body, let's say, with these very power ions, we'll use power glasses. He's saying that economically you need to offer money to those people who are either abroad or sitting somewhere else. The offer should be economically beneficial so that they come out and start working.
You won't receive 300 euros in social benefits in Germany. Here you'll have your mother's borscht, your wife, family, and your own home in your homeland.
Well, this is interesting too. So he's saying there are two statements here. I would agree with one, but not with the other. So he's not talking complete nonsense here, let's put it that way. Basically, he's offering 300 euros. How much did he say? 25,000 hryvnias. Actually, I think it's more like 500 euros, not 300. Well, that's how it is. He's offering to give it to those who are staying in apartments or those who... Come from abroad. I still don't get it. Will those in Ukraine receive the same amount? Well, okay, if a person who is staying in an apartment now and really isn't working because they're afraid of the draft office, I'm sure they'll gladly go work for those same 25,000 hryvnias and not be afraid of the draft office. As he says, you can walk with your family, eat borscht and all that, but excuse me, to come from abroad for 500 euros for what? For what exactly? So for what? I really don't understand. People in Germany or in any other country in Europe get more than 500 euros and live much better than in Ukraine right now. Currently in Ukraine, aside from the draft center guys, there are many other pleasures. Like these young people who walk around shouting and like those same crazy draft center guys who might beat you up and leave you somewhere before realizing you have a draft exemption. On top of all that, there's the war, bombings, water and food are getting more expensive, and gas prices are now higher than in Europe. I read something similar today. Let me know if that's wrong. That's what they're saying. Overall, things are really bad in Ukraine now. And for 500 euros if someone comes from abroad, well, those are really just people who truly miss their homeland. Overall, the offer is, let's say, reasonable. Really, if you offer a person, again, not everyone abroad makes a lot of money. There are also those who make 1,000, 1,000, 1,200 there, but for Ukraine, that's a huge amount of money. I mean, that's about 50,000 hryvnias, and there are very few salaries like that. An official, like a deputy, officially, well, we know officially, gets 52,000, but how much do people actually get there in reality? The average salary is inflated because they usually include Kiev and other cities where salaries are high. In reality, it might actually be $300, $400, or even less. Especially for doctors and teachers, unless it's some fancy hospital or elite school. Overall, this proposal seems pretty good, but it needs some work. Besides, I'm not sure that this guy is saying all this just to get it done. Maybe he is, and if so, respect to him. But if it's just for pure PR, well, there are already plenty of those PR guys. By the way, let me know if you know who this is, because this is the first time in a long while that something sounds more or less reasonable. It's the first more or less reasonable thing I've heard in a long time. Well, that's how things are for us overall. There are still some threats to Belarus. The military disaster continues from all sides, and these threats from both sides keep going. And at the same time, politicians keep meeting. This meeting with Tikhanovskaya, which seems kind of staged, just confirms what I'm saying. Absolutely nobody needs this peace. People just want to chat somewhere, sit there looking pretty, take pictures, hang up another certificate or diploma, get an award or a little grant to develop their own little project, and remain very satisfied with themselves and their powerful leader. But that's it. Goodbye, everyone.
At some point, we were told the dollar would be 40 or 45 under Zelensky. There would be chaos in the country. There would be war. But look, nothing happened, and nothing is left. It happened, but nothing happened.